On November 8th of 2016, the United States of America will hold its 58th quadrennial presidential election to elect its 45th president. This video will present an overview of the four major candidates, Donald Trump, Gary Johnson, Jill Stein, and Hillary Clinton, followed by a science-focused summary of the policy positions held by each candidate, a brief discussion of the Electoral Map, and a look at who's likely to win. The candidates. Donald Trump is a businessman, TV celebrity, and nominee of the Republican Party. He is a strongly nationalist candidate whose political positions frequently change and are often either vague to the point of making no sense or contradictory in the sense that they oppose other statements he's made during the campaign. Trump has been described by many as a populist, with some of his economic policies such as tax cuts and deregulation appealing to conservatives, some of his social policies such as government investment and entitlement programs appealing to liberals, and his signature rhetoric against immigration, globalization and free trade having gained support from the alt-right, a nationalist right-wing movement disaffected by many of the social and economic views advanced by American conservatism. On the political compass, Trump is right-wing and very authoritarian. Gary Johnson is a businessman, the former governor of New Mexico, and nominee of the Libertarian Party. Johnson proposes to dramatically limit the size, power, and regulatory role of government, cutting domestic and military spending by 43%, but wishes to retain some regulatory oversight from agencies like the EPA. He promotes individual rights and personal freedoms, opposes interventionist foreign policy, and believes that free markets are the solution to most economic, environmental, and societal problems. On the political compass, Johnson is very right-wing and somewhat libertarian. Jill Stein is a medical doctor, political activist, and nominee of the Green Party. She is a liberal and her policies are primarily focused on a strong climate change intervention and universal health care, but she's also called for electoral reform and is concerned about the negative influence of corporate money on government. On the political compass, Stein is left-wing and libertarian. Hillary Clinton is a former New York senator, the former Secretary of State and nominee of the Democratic Party. Clinton has described herself as kind of a moderate and centre, and a progressive who likes to get things done and to find common ground. Her policies are largely a continuation of the current administration, with moderate action on climate change and resistance to left-wing policies like universal healthcare and electoral reform. Her campaign has focused on social issues like LGBT equality, racial bias, and women's rights. On the political compass, Clinton is right-wing and somewhat authoritarian. The role of government. Donald Trump wants deep cuts to the size and function of federal government. He said that the Department of Education is going to be cut big league, that the Environmental Protection Agency can be cut down to shreds, and that the agriculture industry should be free to seek its best solutions through the market system instead of what he calls totally inappropriate influence from the federal government. Overall, he wants to cut 70 to 80% of regulations, believing that a vibrant, robust, free market system will regulate the private sector. Trump's understanding of the US Constitution is unusual, and he frequently presents ideas which would directly violate it. He's proposed changing libel laws to permit censorship of the free press, denying American citizens accused of terrorism the right to trial by their peers, and bringing back the torture of prisoners, which would be violations of the First, Sixth, and Eighth Amendments, respectively. Trump has also proposed getting rid of the Johnson Amendment, which currently prohibits churches from using their money to endorse and oppose political candidates. This law exists to allow the government to subsidize churches through tax exemption without violating the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. Its repeal would almost certainly require churches to be taxed, which probably isn't what Trump or the evangelical Christians this proposal panders to had in mind. For the Supreme Court, Trump wants to appoint justices who will ban abortion by overturning Roe v. Wade, and people who would, quote, look very seriously at Hillary Clinton's email disaster, apparently unaware that the latter is not the function of the Supreme Court. Gary Johnson believes in a small federal government and has said that government spending should be cut by 43% across all agencies. He also wishes to abolish the Department of Education, the Internal Revenue Service, the National Security Agency, the Department of Commerce, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. That said, Johnson has cited some agencies, like the EPA, as an example of good government that should be retained to protect US citizens. Johnson's approach to regulations is reducing federal regulations where possible. He would also repurpose some agencies like the FDA from regulation to information. As a constitutional originalist, Johnson believes he is interpreting the Constitution as intended by the framers. He supports amending the Constitution to require an annual balanced budget, advocates term limits, and believes the US should resort to military action as the last option and only as provided in the Constitution. On the Supreme Court, Johnson has said that he would fill the vacancy with someone who views the Constitution from a perspective of original intent. Bill Weld, Johnson's running mate, has praised Obama's nominee Merrick Garland, saying that he would have been a good pick. Jill Stein has a degree of mistrust for some federal agencies, notably the FDA, EPA, and CDC, due to influence from corporations and the pharmaceutical industry. She has said that the EPA should apply science in the public interest, free from the corrupting influence of industry that has historically had too much influence over EPA scientific decisions. Stein views the regulatory power of government as an important tool and has proposed new regulations and subsidies to advance her policies. On the Constitution, Stein supports repealing the Patriot Act, saying that it symbolises the death of the Fourth Amendment and the right to judicial review. Stein has said that she would appoint Supreme Court justices who believe corporations are corporations, not people, and fight to get corporate money and influence out of the political process. Stein also believes that Merrick Garland should get a hearing in the Senate. Hillary Clinton would use existing agencies to advance policy agendas. She believes that environmental, health and energy regulations benefit Americans and that they should be driven by the best available science. She strongly supports the freedom to and from religion and considers efforts to legislatively discriminate against gay people through religious freedom acts to be unconstitutional. She supports the right to gun ownership under the Second Amendment but wishes to close legal loopholes in background checks. Clinton disagrees with Citizens United v. Federal Election Commission, which allows the unlimited spending on politics by ruling that corporations are people, and disagrees with Burwell v. Hobby Lobby, which allows corporations to impose religious beliefs on their employees. Clinton would nominate Supreme Court justices to overturn these decisions and has also expressed her support for Obama's nominee Merrick Garland. Science. Trump says he wants a strong space program, but has expressed concern over the low Earth orbit operations of NASA, which include Earth monitoring and climate change research, and has said that he's enthusiastic about space exploration being taken over by private companies. Trump has also said that NASA isn't a funding priority, suggesting that a portion of NASA's budget would be diverted to infrastructure spending. Trump has called climate change a hoax and a Chinese deception. He said that he believes in weather and clean air, but that global warming is, quote, bullshit. Trump doesn't think producers should be required to label genetically modified foods, and he's been inconsistent on his stance on vaccination. On the one hand, his campaign has issued statements praising vaccination programs, but he has stated on multiple occasions that he believes there's a link between vaccines and autism. Gary Johnson wants private sector dominance in space exploration and has said that NASA will be receiving the same 43% cut as other agencies. Despite accepting the scientific consensus on climate change and agreeing that the consequences will be devastating for mankind, he doesn't believe that governments have the right to intervene and hopes instead for a free market solution. He hasn't taken a stance on GMO foods except to say that producers should be required to label them, and Johnson appears to support state-mandated vaccination programs and is prepared to yield that authority to the federal government in the case of regional or national disease outbreaks. Jill Stein wants the peaceful exploration of space, space-based systems to monitor environmental conditions on Earth, and measures to ensure that space technology benefits all the people of Earth. She would like the US to lead international collaboration in space science and exploration without privatizing outer space or turning over space science and exploration efforts to corporations. Stein has called climate change the greatest existential threat that humanity has ever faced, and would, quote, enact an emergency Green New Deal to turn the tide on climate change, revive the economy, and make wars for oil obsolete. She has also stressed the importance of space science and Earth observation in understanding climate change. Stein is skeptical of GMOs and wants them banned until they are proven safe. She also supports labelling. She believes strongly in vaccination as a public health measure, but has concerns over corporate influence on regulatory agencies. She has expressed concern over preservatives like mercury in vaccines and is skeptical over the impartiality of regulatory agencies, citing corporate influence. Clinton says she will, quote, maintain our nation's leadership in space with a program that balances science, technology, and exploration, citing Earth systems monitoring and robotic exploration as priorities. She calls climate change an urgent threat and a defining challenge of our time, and has said she will build on recent progress and continue to slash greenhouse gas pollution. Her targets of 50% renewable power generation by 2026 and reducing American oil consumption by 1/3 are primarily driven through pollution standards and tax incentives. Clinton has expressed support for genetically modified organisms, citing their proven track record, and has stated that the facts do not support the negative public perception of GMOs. She is in favour of allowing the states to choose whether they label foods as genetically modified. Clinton is a strong advocate of vaccinations and cites the eradication of measles, whooping cough, and diphtheria as goals. She has expressed concern over outbreaks of measles in the US and wishes for industry, non-profits, foundations, and government to collaborate in the development of new vaccines, but hasn't put forward any clear proposal for dealing with declining vaccination rates. Energy. Trump's goal is to achieve energy independence for the United States as soon as possible. Because he believes that climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese government, he's unconcerned with cutting down on fossil fuel emissions and has stated that he will explore the development of every possible energy source to achieve this. Trump has described government efforts to deploy renewable energy as a mistake and a bad investment, repeatedly criticizing wind and solar energy as being ineffective and ugly. He would also cancel all spending on climate change research and cut all federal funds to clean energy development and deployment. Trump has called oil there for the taking and wants more drilling with fewer regulations. He has proposed approving the Keystone XL oil pipeline, restoring the coal industry, investing in fracking and even drilling for oil in the Arctic, though it should be noted that as coal's biggest competitor, investing in fracking will actually accelerate coal's decline, not save it. Trump has called the carbon tax job-killing and would pull out of the Paris Agreement, stating that it's bad for business. Regarding nuclear power, Trump has said that it must be an integral part of energy independence for America. Gary Johnson's goal is to limit government interference in energy and the environment, but he also wishes to retain certain safety standards and cites the EPA as an example of good government. Johnson supports allowing public sector development of renewable technology, but doesn't want the government to fund it. He also rejects government efforts to control or limit greenhouse gases. On fossil fuels, Johnson wants to build new coal-fired power plants and supports the continued use of fossil fuels, but also wants government agencies like the EPA to protect Americans against businesses that would harm human health, property, or the environment. Johnson is concerned about fracking and has stated that it should be studied and regulated. He does not support the carbon tax. Johnson is a strong supporter of nuclear power precisely because it produces energy without greenhouse gases and has said that strict nuclear safety standards are required due to the possibility of catastrophic results in their absence. Jill Stein's goal is to mitigate the effects of climate change through a combination of financial incentives and investment in renewable technologies. Stein wants a 100% transition to renewable energy by 2030 by investing in wind, solar, tidal and geothermal energy, as well as public transit and sustainable agriculture. She would levy a tax on emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, eliminate government subsidies for fossil fuels and institute a national ban on fracking. Stein has said that nuclear fission technology is unsafe, expensive and dirty, from the mining of uranium to the disposal of spent fuel. So dangerous is nuclear material, according to Stein, that even its transport will be banned and all existing nuclear waste will be stored on-site into perpetuity. Her plan is to phase out nuclear power over a 10-year period, beginning with an end to all subsidies. Hillary Clinton says that there is a false dilemma in choosing between economy or environment and believes that a smart energy policy can advance both. Clinton wants to work towards generating 25% of electricity from renewable sources by 2025, up from its current level of 13%, which will be done primarily through solar technology. She will also extend tax credits for renewable energy projects. Clinton has avoided taking a stance on a carbon tax and prefers to talk about clean energy over renewables. By 2026, she aims to generate 50% of electricity through clean sources and to have reduced American oil consumption by 1/3. Clinton will invest in natural gas, which includes fracking, as a bridge fuel to renewable energy and strongly supports moving away from coal. She is not in favor of drilling for oil in the Arctic or off the US coast. Clinton has said that she will increase investment in the research, development and deployment of advanced nuclear power, praising it as a zero-carbon energy source, and will work to ensure that existing nuclear power plants are safe to operate. So what do the polls say? Here's an electoral map courtesy of 538.com of all 50 states plus Washington, D.C. There are 538 electoral votes in total and a candidate needs 270 to win. These states are all but certain to vote Democrat, so they're not terribly important, and these states are equally likely to vote Republican. So each get put in the bin for their respective candidates, and already we can see that the Democratic nominee has a 21-point head start, but that neither candidate has won. What actually determines the outcome of presidential elections are the swing states. These vary between election years, and there's usually some disagreement on which states qualify, but here are the likely swing states for the 2016 election. Light blue lean Democrat, light red lean Republican, and grey are 50-50. There are multiple paths to victory for each candidate, and the odds clearly favour Hillary Clinton, but a victory for Donald Trump is absolutely possible. According to Nate Silver on 538, if Trump is within 2 points of Clinton in the popular vote, then Colorado and New Hampshire become toss-ups, and Trump's chances in Wisconsin, Michigan and Pennsylvania go up to about 1 in 3. Victory for Donald Trump requires the popular vote to be close, a win in at least one of these light blue states, but 2 or even 3 if he suffers a loss in North Carolina or Nevada, and he absolutely must win Florida. In a favourable scenario for Trump where he wins all of the 50-50 states and all of the light red states, he still only got to 265 electoral college votes, and so one of these 5 states is an absolute must-win for Trump. Under this model, the most likely of the light blue states to flip red are New Hampshire and Colorado. If Trump wins Colorado, he has 274 votes and he would win. If Trump wins New Hampshire, both candidates will have 269 votes and the general election is effectively cancelled. Then a new election is held where each state gets 1 vote and the state legislatures decide who to cast that vote for. Since 31 of the 50 state legislatures are Republican, Trump would still win. But if Trump can't win over Colorado or New Hampshire, he probably can't win in Michigan, Pennsylvania or Wisconsin either, and Clinton will have won. Going into the election, there's about 2 points separating Trump and Clinton nationally, so she will probably retain all of the light blue states and win the presidency by a narrow margin. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please share, subscribe, or if you're feeling particularly heroic, fund future content on this channel through Patreon.